Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and if you've ever found yourself staring at a native English speaker while they're talking and feeling completely lost, you are not alone. This podcast was created for moments exactly like that. I've been talking to learners from all around the world, and time after time, one challenge keeps coming up: understanding fast English speakers. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched a YouTube video or taken an English class and felt pretty confident about your skills, only to later speak with a native speaker and suddenly feel like they're speaking another language altogether? You nod politely, maybe smile, but deep down you're thinking, what did they just say? If that sounds familiar, stay with me. Today's episode is just for you. Understanding fast English isn't about being perfect. It's not about knowing every word or memorizing grammar rules. It's about recognizing the patterns, the rhythm, the way real people actually speak in everyday life. That means contractions, connected words, reduced sounds, and expressions that don't always follow textbook rules. And here's the truth. That kind of English can sound fast, even when it's not. That's why this episode is so important. Because once you start to hear English the way native speakers actually use it, things begin to change. You stop translating in your head. You stop feeling stressed. You start understanding more without even realizing it. And that's when your confidence really starts to grow. Let me tell you something I believe with all my heart. Every learner has the ability to understand fast English. It's not a special talent. It's not something only young people or people with perfect accents can do. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed. It takes practice, yes. But more than that, it takes patience and the right strategies. And that's exactly what I want to share with you here. In this episode, we're going to walk through some practical and realistic tips to help you follow fast English more easily without feeling overwhelmed. You don't need to understand every single word. You just need to catch the important ones. You don't have to speak like a native. You just need to train your ears to follow the flow. We're not chasing perfection here. We're building fluency, one step at a time. Now let's make something clear. If you've struggled with this in the past, it's not your fault. Most English learners are taught with slow, clear, and carefully pronounced audio. That's fine for beginners. But once you leave the classroom and try to use English in the real world, the difference can feel like a slap in the face. Native speakers don't slow down. They blend their words. They skip syllables. And when you're not used to it, it can be exhausting to follow. But the good news is, there are ways to train your brain to handle this. And today, I'm going to show you how. It doesn't matter if you're learning English in Paris, Seoul, Nairobi, or Jakarta. These techniques are universal, and they work no matter where you are or what your level is right now. I know it can be frustrating when you feel like your English is improving, but then someone speaks too fast and all your progress disappears. But here's something I want you to remember. Learning a language doesn't happen in a straight line. It happens in layers. You might feel stuck right now, but this is part of the process. You're not going backward. You're just building a deeper level of understanding. Every time you expose yourself to real English, your brain is working behind the scenes to make sense of it. Even when you don't notice it, you're learning. You're moving forward. I also want you to know that you're not doing this alone. You're part of a global community of people who are facing the same challenge. People from Rome, Mumbai, Cape Town, Berlin, Hanoi, Los Angeles, and countless other places, all trying to understand and speak English with confidence. And this podcast, this space, is here for you. We're growing together. Every episode is like a small brick in the foundation of your fluency. If this is your first time listening, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. And if you've been with me for a while, thank you for coming back. You're the reason I do this. And if you find this episode helpful, take a second to follow or subscribe to the podcast. It helps us grow and reach more learners who need this kind of support. Leave a review or share it with a friend who's also learning English. It's a simple way to encourage others who might be feeling stuck right now. Before we jump into the practical tips, I just want to say one more thing. I know this process can feel heavy sometimes. You want to speak fluently, you want to understand without stress, and you might feel like it's taking too long. But let me remind you, you're already doing something most people are too afraid to do. You're learning a second language. You're showing up even when it's hard. And that takes courage. You should be proud of that. So, take a deep breath. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to rush. All you need to do is take the next step. Today, that step is learning how to train your ears and your brain to follow real, fast English. It's possible. You can do it. And I'll be here with you through the process. Ready? Let's get started. I want to tell you about Sophia, a listener from Barcelona, Spain. She reached out to me a few months ago, and her story really stayed with me because it's something I hear all the time. Sophia had been learning English through an online course. It was one of those structured, well-designed programs with clear lessons, grammar explanations, vocabulary lists, and listening exercises. She followed the plan, practiced daily, and even completed the full course with good scores. She felt confident. Her listening skills were strong when she played the audio lessons. She could follow video subtitles easily. She even started thinking in English during certain moments of her day. For Sophia, English was finally starting to feel comfortable. That's why she decided to reward herself with something she had dreamed of for a long time: a trip to Dublin. She wanted to walk the streets of a real English-speaking city, meet people, and use what she had learned. It was exciting. And for the first few hours, it was everything she imagined. She arrived, checked into her hotel, and ordered coffee at a nearby cafe. The barista understood her English and gave her a warm smile. Everything seemed to be going just fine. But things changed quickly when she stepped out onto the busy streets of the city and tried to interact more naturally. That's when the reality hit her. A man bumped into her on the sidewalk and said something, but she had no idea what it was. It sounded like a blur. Then a woman asked her for directions, speaking so fast and casually that Sophia couldn't even catch a single complete sentence. She just smiled and shook her head. She felt confused, like her English had suddenly disappeared. Later that day, she went into a small bookstore and tried to ask the employee a simple question about local authors. The woman responded with a cheerful tone, but Sophia couldn't follow anything she said. Not because it was advanced vocabulary, not because the topic was difficult, but because the speed, the rhythm, the way the words blended together, it all felt like too much. It was nothing like her online course. The contractions were everywhere. The pronunciation was much less clear than she was used to, and the phrases were full of informal expressions that she hadn't heard before. She told me, "It felt like I hadn't learned anything." I just stood there, nodding, smiling, pretending to understand. And when I left the shop, I almost cried. I thought I was ready for real English, but I wasn't. If you've ever felt like that, if you've ever gone from confidence in the classroom to confusion in the real world, I want you to know you're not alone. What Sophia experienced is extremely common, and it doesn't mean she failed. It doesn't mean you failed either. It simply means the type of English she was exposed to during her learning was very different from what native speakers actually use in casual conversation. You see, learning English from textbooks, apps, and even online video lessons often gives you a filtered version of the language. It's clean, structured, and clear. And that's necessary at the beginning. You need that foundation. But once you step into the world of real conversations, you face a different challenge. One that has more to do with rhythm, listening patterns, and adapting your ear to natural speech. Sophia's mistake wasn't in her effort. She was committed. She practiced every day. The problem was that her ears were trained for slow English. But the world doesn't speak slowly. People cut words, combine sounds, and speak with local expressions that are never covered in a course. And when your brain isn't used to that, it can feel like you're drowning in sound. I remember asking her what part was most difficult. She said, "It's not just the speed, it's the way everything connects." I expected clear words, but instead I got phrases like wanna, gonna, and lemme. She realized that her brain was looking for individual words, but native speakers rarely separate them so cleanly. Instead, they speak in waves. The meaning is hidden in the rhythm, not just the vocabulary. That moment of frustration, though, was actually the beginning of something powerful. Because when you realize that your struggle is normal and not a sign of failure, it opens the door to real progress. Sophia didn't give up. After returning from her trip, she started doing something different. She began listening to podcasts, not lessons, but actual English conversations. She used subtitles at first, but then slowly turned them off. She practiced listening to songs, to interviews, to people speaking naturally on YouTube. At first, she could only catch small parts, but over time, her ears began to adjust. Her brain started to recognize the rhythm, the common phrases, the way native speakers connect ideas. And that's when she told me something that really made me smile. She said, "Now when I listen, I don't understand every word, but I understand what they mean. I feel like I'm inside the language, not just watching it from the outside. That's what I want for you too." Because this story isn't just about Sophia, it's about every learner who feels prepared on paper but gets surprised in real life. It's about the emotional shift that happens when you realize understanding fast English isn't about being perfect. It's about adjusting, tuning in, and learning to listen in a new way. So if you've ever been in a situation like Sophia's where someone spoke fast and all you heard was noise, please don't feel discouraged. It doesn't mean your English is weak. It means your next step is to practice listening in the real world. Get used to the natural flow. Pay attention to the way sounds connect. Give your brain time to catch up, because that's all it takes. Not a miracle, not more grammar, just consistent exposure and the belief that, yes, you can understand fast English speakers. And once you get past the shock of that first experience, just like Sophia did, you'll realize it's not impossible. It's just unfamiliar, and with time, it becomes part of you. When people tell me, native speakers talk too fast, I just can't keep up, I always pause and ask them one simple question. Are they really speaking faster, or are they just speaking differently from what you're used to hearing? That question usually surprises them, but it's the beginning of a major shift in how we think about listening to English. Let's break this down together. One of the biggest reasons English spoken by natives sounds fast is because they're not separating every word clearly like we see in lessons or subtitles. Instead, they connect their words in a natural, smooth flow. This is something that happens in every language, not just English. But if your brain has only practiced listening to slow, clear, textbook-style English, then when you hear the real version, your mind isn't prepared for how different it sounds. Here's an example. In a classroom or an app, you might learn the sentence, "What are you going to do today?" Every word is separate, easy to follow. But a native speaker will likely say, "What you gonna do today?" The same sentence, but faster, smoother, and using reductions. That's not a new sentence. That's not advanced grammar. It's just how people speak when they're relaxed and in their natural rhythm. This is called connected speech. It's when words blend together in ways that follow patterns native speakers use without even thinking about it. The T at the end of what connects to the A in are, turning what are into whatche. Going to becomes gonna. This isn't slang or lazy speaking. This is normal, everyday English spoken naturally by people all over the world. But if you've never been exposed to those patterns, of course it's going to sound fast. It's not your fault. It's not that your listening isn't strong, it's that your ears haven't yet been trained to recognize the rhythm of real English. Imagine trying to listen to a song for the first time. You wouldn't expect to remember every lyric right away. It takes time to notice the beat, the melody, the way it all fits together. Listening to natural English is the same, and there's more. Another reason native English can feel fast is the use of reductions, words that are pronounced in a shorter or softer way. Want to becomes wanna. Let me becomes lemme. Did you becomes didja. These forms are not incorrect. They're simply how real people speak when they're not in a classroom or reading a script. If your listening practice is only based on slow, deliberate pronunciation, you're going to miss a lot of these reduced forms in conversation. This is why I tell every learner, don't panic when it sounds fast. In most cases, native speakers are not talking faster than you can handle. They're just using a version of English that your ears haven't met yet. Once you learn to expect these patterns, your brain starts to catch them automatically. Let me share a personal observation. I once worked with a student named Arjun from New Delhi, who had excellent grammar and vocabulary. He could write beautifully, and his pronunciation was clear and confident. But every time he watched an interview or tried to understand people in real-life situations, he would get lost. He kept telling me, "They're just too fast. So I gave him an exercise. I asked him to take a short video clip, just 20 seconds long, of two people speaking naturally. No subtitles, just the audio. Then I told him to listen again and again, not trying to understand everything, but to focus on the sound, the rhythm, the way the words connected. After a few repetitions, he said, "Wait, are they saying didja instead of did you?" And I smiled. Because that was the moment he stopped hearing noise and started hearing language. Once he started listening for those patterns, everything changed. Suddenly, it didn't feel so fast anymore. It was still a challenge, yes, but it was no longer a mystery. And that's the key. Once you understand what native speakers are actually doing with their speech, it becomes a puzzle you can solve, not a wall you can't climb. There's also the role of intonation and stress. Native speakers don't give equal time and emphasis to every word. Some words are stressed, said louder or longer, while others are reduced or softened. For example, in the sentence, "I'm gonna call her later," the stress is usually on call and later. The other words sort of slip by quickly. If your ear is waiting to hear every word pronounced clearly and slowly, you'll miss the key points because the words you're expecting aren't being emphasized. This is why understanding fast English is not about speed training, it's about pattern recognition. Once your brain starts to notice these speech habits, connected words, reductions, natural intonation, you'll realize that what once sounded like one long, impossible word is actually just a sentence you already know, spoken in a way you haven't practiced yet. I want to be clear about something. You do not need to copy these speaking habits in your own English. You don't need to say gonna instead of going to or didja instead of did you. What matters is that you understand them. Because native speakers use them all the time, and if you're not prepared to hear those forms, conversations will always feel too fast, even when the content is simple. So instead of trying to slow English down, try to open your ears to how it flows. Think of it like learning to dance. At first, you're focused on each step, but later, when you feel the rhythm, you start to move with it. That's what happens when you train your listening to recognize real English patterns. And here's something I want you to remember. The reason it feels fast now is because your brain is still learning where to focus. With time and practice, you'll start to hear those phrases that used to disappear. You'll recognize "let me know" as "let me know." You'll hear "what you doing?" and instantly know it means "what are you doing?" That's progress. That's fluency growing in the background. So the next time you listen to a native speaker and it feels like everything is rushing by, take a breath and ask yourself, do I really need to hear every word? Or do I need to understand the pattern? Because most of the time, you already know the words. You just haven't heard them like this before. And once you learn to expect the connections, reductions, and rhythm, you'll stop hearing fast English and start hearing real English. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in your English listening journey is this. Stop focusing only on the words and start listening to the music of the language. That might sound strange at first. English isn't a song, right? But if you've ever felt overwhelmed by fast English, or like all the words are running together, it's probably because you're trying to hear each word clearly and separately, like you do when you read. But spoken English doesn't work like that. It flows. It has rhythm. It has melody. And just like music, it has beats that guide the listener. Let me explain what I mean. English is a stress-timed language. That means some words are naturally stressed. They're louder, longer, and clearer, while other words are unstressed, softer, and often reduced. When native speakers talk, they don't give equal time and energy to every word. That's why, when you listen to a real conversation, it often feels like certain words just vanish. But they don't actually disappear. They're still there. They're just whispered, blended, or shortened to keep the natural flow going. For example, think about this sentence. I want to go to the store. In a classroom, every word might be said clearly. I want to go to the store. But in natural conversation, it sounds more like, I want to go to the store. The important words here are want, go, and store. Those are the content words. They carry the main message. The rest, I, to, the, are function words. They help build the sentence, but they're not the core message. So native speakers naturally reduce them, saying them faster and softer. That's the music of English. This pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables, of strong and soft beats. If you start to tune your ear to that rhythm, everything changes. You begin to recognize patterns, even if you don't catch every individual word. You start to feel the movement of the language, and your brain becomes faster at predicting what comes next. Just like in a song, where your ear knows the chorus is about to repeat, in English, your ear starts to anticipate how a phrase will sound. Let me give you a practical example. Take this question: what do you want to do today? In slow, clear English, it's easy. But in real speech, it becomes, what do you want to do today? It sounds like one long sound when you're not used to it. But if you break it down by rhythm, you'll notice the stress goes on want, do, and today. Those are the beats of the sentence. The rest is the melody connecting them. Once your ear learns to catch those beats, the sentence stops being a blur and starts making sense. Now, I'm not saying you need to become a musician or memorize rules of rhythm. This isn't about theory, it's about training your ears. Just like you don't need to know how music is written to enjoy a song, you don't need to know every grammar rule to understand the flow of English. You just need to listen differently. Listen for the stressed words. Notice what stands out in the sentence. And don't panic when some words seem to vanish, because that's exactly what native speakers do. I had a student once. Her name was Hana from Jakarta. She was really frustrated because she could read and write English well, and even speak with confidence. But when she listened to people talking in movies or at her international job, she often got lost. She told me, "It's like they're swallowing their words. I can't hear anything clearly." I introduced her to this idea of English as music. We watched a short clip together, only about 10 seconds, and I asked her to close her eyes and focus only on the stress, not the words. She listened again and said, "Oh, I hear the rhythm now. Some words are louder. It's like a drum beat." That moment was key for her. Once she stopped trying to hear every single word clearly and started following the beat of the sentence, her listening improved rapidly. She told me later that she could finally enjoy watching series without subtitles. Not because she suddenly understood every word, but because she understood the rhythm. She wasn't chasing each sound. She was flowing with the conversation. You can practice this too. Pick a short clip of real English, an interview, a podcast, or even a scene from a show, and listen to it several times. On the first listen, don't try to understand everything. Just notice which words are stressed. Which words are loud, long, and clear. Mark them in your mind. On the second listen, pay attention to the softer words. How are they reduced? Do they link to the next word? Are they said quickly or quietly? Keep repeating until you can feel the rhythm of the sentence. And trust me, the more you do this, the more your ears will adapt. And here's another thing. Don't get discouraged if this feels hard at first. You weren't born understanding the music of English. You learned the vocabulary, you studied the grammar, but no one may have taught you how English sounds in real life. So give yourself permission to be a beginner in this part. Let yourself play with the sounds. I always say, fluency isn't just about knowing words. It's about feeling the language. That feeling comes from rhythm, tone, and flow. Think about how you recognize a song you like. Sometimes, you only need the first few seconds of the melody, and you already know what song. That's because your brain remembers the sound pattern, not just the words. English works the same way. The more you listen, the more those patterns get stored in your brain. And the next time you hear that same phrase, your brain will go, "Ah, I know this rhythm," even before you consciously understand the words. Also, remember this. Stressed words are usually the ones that carry meaning. If you focus your attention there, you'll catch the main message, even if you miss the smaller details. That's how native speakers process fast speech. They don't catch every word either. They listen for the main beats, and they fill in the rest with context. You can train your ears to do the same. I know many of you are used to studying with written material, where every word is printed and easy to analyze. That's helpful, of course. But don't let reading habits control your listening. Spoken. English is a different experience. It's alive, it moves, it has rhythm and emotion. The music of English is what makes it beautiful, and once you start hearing it, everything becomes more natural. So when you feel lost in fast speech, don't try to slow it down. Don't try to catch every word. Instead, ask yourself, where's the beat? What's the rhythm? And let the music guide you. You might be surprised how much you understand when you stop listening for perfection and start listening for the flow. I want to tell you a story about Amir, a listener of our podcast from Istanbul, who found a creative and surprisingly effective way to improve his ability to understand fast English. Amir works at a large multinational tech company where English is the main language in meetings, emails, and presentations. At first, he felt confident. He had studied English for years in school, read technical documents with ease, and even wrote emails without much trouble. But the moment he stepped into a real-time video meeting with colleagues from London, New York, and Sydney, something strange happened. Everything became a blur. He told me, "Julia, I could hear the words, but I couldn't process them. By the time I understood the beginning of a sentence, they were already 2 sentences ahead." Amir wasn't struggling with vocabulary or grammar. His problem was speed, and more specifically, the way native speakers speak naturally. The contractions, the blended sounds, the sudden shifts in rhythm, and the informal tone, it all made him feel like he was always one step behind. That's when he decided to change his approach. He stopped treating English like a school subject and started treating it like a living language. One evening, frustrated after another meeting where he barely understood anything, Amir remembered something I said in an older podcast episode about the rhythm of English, how listening to full phrases instead of individual words could change the way your brain processes language. That night, instead of opening his textbook, he searched for an English podcast that matched the kind of conversations he wanted to understand. He picked one that featured business interviews and casual discussions between professionals. He told me he didn't try to understand everything at first. Instead, he chose a 10-minute episode and listened to it 3 times without stopping. On the first listen, he just paid attention to the rhythm. On the second listen, he focused on where the speaker's voice rose and fell, how certain words seemed stronger and others softer. By the third listen, he paused after each sentence and repeated it out loud exactly as he heard it, mimicking the same tone, stress, and speed. At first, it felt silly, he said, but after only a few days, something began to change. The following week, Amir noticed that during his work meetings, he didn't feel so overwhelmed. He couldn't understand every single word, but now he was catching the flow. He could follow the rhythm of the conversation and predict when someone was giving an opinion, asking a question, or wrapping up their point. He said it felt like learning to dance. He might not know every step yet, but he was finally moving in sync with the music. One method that really helped him was shadowing. That's when you listen to a native speaker and repeat everything they say in real time, trying to match their intonation and speed. Amir started doing this every morning during his commute. He'd put on his headphones, choose a short podcast segment, and shadow the speaker sentence by sentence. At first, he stumbled over words, but slowly his tongue and brain began to sync. The stress patterns, the pauses, the contractions, they all started to feel natural. He also made one small change that made a big difference. Instead of listening to random clips, he chose topics that were meaningful to him: technology, leadership, project management. This kept him engaged and gave him useful vocabulary. He told me that understanding wasn't just about listening longer. It was about listening with intention and repeating with purpose. He wasn't just hearing English, he was absorbing it. After about 2 months, Amir had a meeting with a group from the New York office. For the first time, he didn't feel lost. He followed the conversation, joined in without hesitation, and even made a few jokes in English. That was a huge moment for him. Not because he spoke perfectly, he didn't, but because he felt confident. He was no longer afraid of the speed. He had trained his ears and his brain to keep up. The key takeaway from Amir's journey is this: fluency isn't about understanding every word. It's about catching the rhythm, recognizing the patterns, and learning to move with the language instead of against it. His story reminds us that when you practice listening to entire phrases, and repeat them aloud. You're not just improving your comprehension, you're rewiring the way your brain hears English. I want you to think about that the next time you feel stuck. Ask yourself, am I only listening to understand words, or am I trying to feel the rhythm? Am I repeating what I hear in full sentences, with the same tone and energy? Because that's how fluency starts, not with perfect grammar or long vocabulary. Lists, but with music, with flow, with repetition that builds confidence. This approach works for everyone, not just Amir. I've seen students from Berlin, Seoul, Nairobi, and Montreal have the same breakthrough. Once they stop trying to understand English like a textbook and start listening like it's a song, something clicks. So try what Amir did. Find a podcast or a video in English that matches your interests. Listen multiple times. Shadow the speaker. Focus on rhythm, not perfection. Let your ears and your voice learn together. And don't worry if you stumble. That's part of the process. Amir did too, but he kept showing up every day, repeating those phrases, feeling the rhythm, and trusting the process. And now he understands fast English better than he ever imagined. You can do the same. I want to share something with you that can completely change the way you listen to English, especially when native speakers are talking fast. One of the biggest mistakes learners make, something I see all the time, is trying to understand every single word. I get it. You've studied hard. You've memorized vocabulary. You want to make sure you don't miss anything. But here's the truth. Trying to catch every word is actually slowing you down. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. And most importantly, it's not how real communication works. Native speakers don't listen word by word. We listen in chunks. We catch the important words, those key words that give us the main idea. Everything else is like background noise. It supports the meaning, but it's not essential to understand the message. And the good news is, you can train yourself to listen this way too. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine someone says, "Hey, I was just wondering if maybe you'd like to grab some coffee later if you're free." That's a long sentence, right? But the key words are wondering, grab coffee, later, free. If you only hear those, you already understand the message. You don't need to understand every word to know what's being asked. And this is how native speakers process speech all the time. We listen for the important words, and we let the rest just flow. So how do you train this kind of selective listening? First, stop thinking that missing a word means you failed. You didn't. You just need to focus differently. The first step is to listen to short clips, just 1 or 2 sentences at a time. Then, try to write down or say aloud what you think the most important words were. Not the full sentence, just the words that carry the meaning. Here's an exercise I often recommend. Find a 1-minute clip of a podcast, interview, or YouTube video. Listen to it once without stopping. Don't try to understand everything. Then ask yourself, what was it about? What were the 3 or 4 most important words or phrases you heard? Don't worry if you didn't catch everything. That's not the point. The goal is to develop your instinct for what matters in a sentence. You can even turn it into a game. After listening, write down the words you remember. Then, go back and check if those were the real key words. Over time, you'll notice something powerful. Your brain starts focusing on meaning, not on form. You start recognizing patterns. You stop getting lost in the noise. Another tip. Keywords are usually nouns, main verbs, and sometimes adjectives or adverbs. Function words like the, a, of, at, to, that are often less important when you're just trying to understand the general idea. Of course, those words matter in grammar, but when it comes to listening in real time, they don't carry the main message. Focus on the words that do. Let me share an example from a student named Layla, who lives in Paris. She used to get overwhelmed during team meetings in English. She'd try to understand every sentence, and by the time she processed one sentence, the conversation had already moved on. I suggested she try the keyword method. She began listening to English TED Talks for 5 minutes a day. But instead of pausing or translating, she just listened for the keywords and then summarized the message in 1 sentence. Within 2 weeks, she told me she felt more relaxed in her meetings. She said, "Now I focus on the key terms like deadline, strategy, delayed, or feedback, and I can follow even if I miss parts of the sentence." That's the shift we want. Let's try another example. If someone says, I was thinking we could maybe meet up around 6, unless you're busy with work, you don't need every detail. Just hearing thinking, meet, 6, busy, work, already tells you what's going on. That's the core message, and your brain can learn to do this quickly. Here's a simple daily habit you can build. Every time you listen to English, whether it's a podcast, a movie, or a conversation, pause and ask yourself, what were the key words? What's the main idea? You don't need to write a full summary. Just think, what's the message here? Start doing this regularly, and you'll find that fast English becomes less scary. It becomes something your brain can handle naturally. Another helpful technique is listening with subtitles for the first time, then turning them off for the second round. During the second listen, try to focus only on the strong words, the ones that made the biggest impression. You'll notice that your mind starts organizing the information differently. Instead of hearing a wall of sound, you'll start to hear a pattern, like a rhythm where key words stand out like beats in a song. One more thing to remember is that not every sentence in English is important. That's another reason we don't need to understand everything. In a conversation, many phrases are just fillers or small talk. You know what I mean? Like, totally. I was just kind of thinking, maybe these don't always carry critical information. You can let them go. Focus on the core. So when you watch a TV show or a movie in English, don't try to translate it all. Choose a character and listen to how they speak. What words do they emphasize? What parts can you ignore without losing the meaning? That's how you train your ears. You're not a machine. You don't need to process everything perfectly. Your goal is communication and comprehension, and the keyword method is the fastest way to build that skill. When you learn to trust your brain to catch the main points, listening becomes easier. You stop feeling anxious. You stop feeling like you're missing out. Because even if you miss a few words, you still understand what's happening, and that's real progress. Just like we talked about with Amir and his rhythm practice, this is another way to reduce the pressure you put on yourself. Let go of perfection. Focus on understanding the heart of the message. That's what fluent listeners do. And with time, you'll become one of them. When you're trying to understand fast English speakers, one of the best tools you can use is something that's already available in almost every video and podcast: subtitles and transcripts. But here's the thing. Most people use them the wrong way. They either depend on subtitles so much that they stop listening actively, or they try to do everything at once and end up overwhelmed. What I want to show you today is how to use subtitles and transcripts strategically. Not as a crutch, but as a smart support system that helps you build stronger listening skills step by step. Let's start with subtitles. Most learners turn on English subtitles because it helps them follow along. And that's fine, especially in the beginning. It gives you confidence and it makes the content more accessible. But if you only use subtitles, your brain starts depending on reading instead of listening. You stop training your ears, and that's not what we want. Subtitles are a tool to support your listening, not replace it. So here's a method I recommend, and it works. I call it the 3-step subtitle strategy. First, watch or listen with subtitles in English. Let your brain connect the sounds and the words. Don't pause, don't stop. Just follow along. Then, watch it again. But this time, turn the subtitles off. Yes, it will feel harder, but that's where the magic happens. You'll start noticing which parts you actually understood and which parts sounded too fast or unclear. That contrast helps your brain focus and grow. Finally, in the 3rd step, read the transcript or turn the subtitles back on, but this time, pause to check what you missed. Take note of phrases or words that surprised you. That repetition creates deep learning. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're watching a 5-minute interview on YouTube. First, you play it with English subtitles. You follow along and get the general idea. Then, you replay the same 5 minutes, this time with subtitles off. Suddenly, it feels like the speaker is talking much faster. That's normal. Your brain is no longer getting reading support. But this second listen is powerful. It shows you how much you really heard. Finally, you play it again, or read the transcript, and you look at what you missed. Maybe the speaker said, "It kind of threw me off," and you had no idea what that meant. Now you see it clearly, and your brain locks it in. When you use this cycle, listen with subtitles, then without, then check the transcript, you activate multiple parts of your brain. You're practicing audio recognition, visual reading, and memory all at once. And more importantly, you're learning to listen independently, not just follow text. Another thing I want to highlight is the difference between active and passive listening. When you use subtitles and transcripts, you want to stay in active mode. That means paying attention to how words are connected, which words are stressed, and how real English sounds, not just what it means. For example, you might notice how going to becomes gonna, or how did you becomes did ya. These details are exactly what make fast English sound confusing to learners. But with the transcript in front of you, you can actually see those reductions and link them to what you're hearing. I had a student named Victor from Warsaw who used this method to improve his understanding of business presentations in English. He told me he used to feel lost during online training sessions for his job because everyone spoke quickly and used lots of idioms. I suggested he take recordings of similar presentations on YouTube and go through the 3-step process. Subtitles on, subtitles off, then transcript review. After 2 weeks, he came back and said, "I'm finally catching what they say. I don't get every word, but I understand the message now." That's the goal. You don't need to understand everything. You need to understand enough, and transcripts help you notice patterns you'd miss if you were just listening casually. For example, seeing a sentence like, "She'd have told you if she knew," written out helps you understand how fast English can compress multiple words. That sentence sounds like "should have told you" in real speech. If you only heard it, you might think it's one word, but when you read it, your brain connects the dots. Another powerful technique is shadowing. You can use the transcript to read aloud along with the audio. But don't just read slowly. Try to match the speaker's rhythm, stress, and speed. It's okay if it feels fast at first. The goal is to train your mouth and ears together. This method helps you internalize the music of English and build listening skills at the same time. You can also use transcripts for vocabulary building. When you find a new phrase in the transcript, highlight it. Then, look for how it sounds in the audio. You'll start to notice that many phrases are not pronounced the way they look. That's one of the reasons fast English is hard to catch. But when you compare the transcript with the audio, you learn how English really sounds, not how it's written. Try this with a favorite TV show, a documentary, or even a podcast like this one. Choose a small segment, just 2 or 3 minutes, and use it like a mini training session. First, play it with subtitles. Then listen again without them. Finally, read the transcript and review what you missed. Take notes if you want, but don't stress about perfection. What matters is repetition and noticing. And here's a little tip. Many YouTube videos have automatic transcripts, and platforms like TED.com give you full scripts of their talks. Use them, save them, print them, if you need. They're a goldmine for listening practice. Remember, the reason this works is because it's focused. You're not just watching random videos for fun. You're breaking the content into small, manageable steps that give your brain time to adjust. The more you do this, the more you'll notice progress. Suddenly, you'll hear phrases you used to miss. You'll recognize sentence patterns. You'll feel more confident. Think of transcripts and subtitles like training wheels. They're there to help you balance at first, but the goal is to ride on your own. If you use them wisely, they'll speed up your learning without becoming a permanent habit. Just make sure you're the one in control, not the subtitles. Use them with intention, and you'll see the results. Let me tell you about Olivia, a young woman from Warsaw, Poland. Olivia always loved the idea of learning English through TV shows. She found it more fun and natural than using textbooks. And she believed that real conversation, the kind people use in everyday life, was what she needed most. So she started watching her favorite American sitcoms, full of jokes, fast dialogue, and casual expressions. But every time she pressed play, something disappointing happened. In the first few minutes, she was completely lost. Characters spoke over each other, used slang, and connected their words in ways that felt like a blur. She could recognize a word here and there, but by the time she understood something, the conversation had already moved on. The experience left her frustrated and confused. At one point, she almost gave up. She told me she felt like English speakers had some secret code she wasn't able to break, and I get it. That feeling of being close to understanding but still not quite there is one of the most discouraging parts of learning a new language. But Olivia didn't quit. Instead, she decided to change her strategy. Rather than jumping from one new episode to another, she chose a single episode, just 20 minutes long, and committed to watching it multiple times. The first time, she let herself enjoy it with English subtitles. She didn't pause, she didn't rewind, she just absorbed the overall meaning, then she played it again. This time, she focused on the rhythm of the speech, listening for word patterns and how characters expressed emotions. She noticed how someone would say, "What are you doing?" so fast that it sounded like, "What you doin'?" Something she never picked up before. Then came the third and fourth rounds. Olivia now began to catch phrases that completely flew over her head the first time. A joke she didn't understand before suddenly made sense. A sarcastic tone she missed became clear. The fifth time watching, she even started repeating some of the characters' lines out loud, mimicking their tone, rhythm, and pauses. Slowly, but surely, the episode that once seemed too fast became familiar. And more than that, it became understandable. This process of repetition changed everything for her. She realized that understanding fast English wasn't just about listening harder, it was about listening smarter. Each time she watched the same material, her brain had less to process. The context became clearer. The vocabulary became more recognizable. And that gave her the mental space to notice pronunciation, intonation, and word connection. There's something powerful about repetition. In school, we're often told to move fast, to cover more ground, to always be moving forward. But when it comes to listening, especially to fast English, repetition slows things down in the best way possible. It gives your brain the time it needs to make sense of patterns. Instead of trying to catch everything at once, you start to notice how certain words always appear together, how people naturally shorten their speech, and how emotions affect tone. Olivia told me that one of her favorite discoveries was the phrase, "You've got to be kidding me." The first time she heard it, it just sounded like noise. But after a few repetitions, she noticed the rhythm, the stress on kidding, and how it was often used in moments of surprise or disbelief. That phrase became a kind of symbol for her progress. What was once just noise had turned into something meaningful. Another important benefit Olivia experienced was confidence. When you watch something once and don't understand it, you feel defeated. But when you go back and start to understand more and more with each repetition, you build confidence. You begin to trust that your ears can adapt, and that your brain will catch up if you give it enough exposure. It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress you can feel. She also found that repetition helped her speak more naturally. By hearing the same expressions multiple times, they became part of her active vocabulary. Phrases like, "I can't believe this," or "let's get out of here," moved from being something she recognized to something she could actually say. And because she repeated them out loud, mimicking the original speakers, she also got used to saying them with the right rhythm and tone. This story isn't just about Olivia. It's about anyone who has ever felt frustrated by fast English. It's a reminder that if you feel lost, you're not alone, and you're not doing anything wrong. English spoken at natural speed can be hard to follow, even for advanced learners, but repetition is one of the most powerful tools we have. It's simple, it's free, and it works. You don't need to repeat hours of content. Just pick something short that you enjoy. A 5-minute YouTube video, a short scene from a movie, or even a part of this podcast. Watch or listen once, then again and again. Don't rush. Let your brain soak in the details. The more familiar the material becomes, the more you'll notice. And the more you notice, the more you understand. When Olivia started doing this, she was surprised by how quickly her listening skills improved. After just 2 weeks of repeating the same few episodes, she told me she was starting to understand new shows more easily, even on the first try. Her brain had become better at recognizing patterns, catching common expressions, and predicting what came next. This is what happens when you stop trying to race through your learning and start going deeper instead. Repetition isn't boring. It's how we train the brain to hear differently, to speak with confidence, and to finally feel comfortable in a language that once felt too fast to follow. So if you've been jumping from video to video, always chasing something new, maybe it's time to pause and take a step back. Try doing what Olivia did. Choose one piece of content and go deep. Watch it several times. Repeat the lines out loud. Let the sounds and rhythms become familiar. That's how real listening skills are built. Not overnight, but through steady, intentional repetition. And once you start to feel those small breakthroughs, I promise you'll want to keep going. One thing I've learned from working with hundreds of English learners is that jumping straight into fast native content can often feel like hitting a wall. You press play on a video, excited and ready, but 10 seconds in, it all sounds like a rush of sound. You hear the language you've been studying, but you can't catch a thing. Your brain starts to panic, and instead of learning, you just feel overwhelmed. That's why I always recommend starting with slower native content first. Now, when I say slower native content, I don't mean unnatural or robotic speech. I'm talking about real English, spoken by native speakers, but at a pace that's easier for the brain to process. You still get the rhythm, the pronunciation, the expressions, and the natural flow, but without the mental overload that often comes with high-speed conversations. This kind of content acts like a bridge between textbook English and the real world. It gives your ears time to adjust and your brain time to catch patterns. Think of it like learning to swim. You wouldn't throw yourself into deep water on the first day. You'd start in the shallow end, maybe holding onto the edge, learning how to float, how to move your arms, how to breathe. That's exactly what slower native content does for your listening skills. It gives you the shallow end, safe, manageable, and incredibly useful for building real understanding. So what kind of content do I mean? One great example is instructional videos, like tutorials on how to cook a recipe, fix a computer issue, or use an app. In these videos, speakers usually talk clearly because they want their viewers to follow step-by-step instructions. They naturally slow down, pause between ideas, and repeat key points. This helps you hear words in context, notice how phrases are grouped together, and understand how the speaker emphasizes important information. Another excellent source is interviews with thoughtful speakers. Not every interview, of course. Some are fast-paced and full of interruptions, but look for interviews with authors, scientists, or people explaining their work. These speakers often take time to think before they speak, and they usually choose their words carefully. The pace is steady, the vocabulary is often rich, and the ideas are presented in a structured way. This makes it easier to follow along, even if your level isn't advanced yet. Podcasts are also a goldmine. There are many podcasts created for native speakers that still maintain a moderate pace. Look for ones where the host speaks clearly and avoids too much background noise or fast banter. I recommend starting with solo episodes or interviews with one guest, rather than panel discussions or comedy shows. The simpler the setup, the easier it is to train your listening. What you're doing with this kind of content is training your brain to recognize the real features of English, the way syllables are stressed, how words connect, how tone changes with meaning. This is very different from classroom recordings or slow artificial English made for learners. The goal is to hear English as it's actually spoken, but in a way that doesn't push you too far too soon. You're also starting to build what I call listening stamina. When you listen to English for several minutes and can actually follow the meaning, you're strengthening your mental focus. At first, even 10 minutes might feel long, but over time, you'll be able to stay with it longer and understand more. It's a skill, and like any skill, it grows with consistent practice. Another benefit of slower native content is that it gives you space to shadow, to repeat after the speaker in real time. When someone speaks at a moderate pace, you can pause the video and mimic their pronunciation and intonation. This kind of active listening is incredibly powerful. You're not just hearing English, you're participating in it. You start to feel how the language moves, and that feeling stays with you. One of my students, Anna from Brazil, made huge progress using this strategy. She found a series of cooking videos on YouTube where the chef spoke slowly, clearly, and with lots of useful vocabulary. At first, she watched just to understand. Then she started repeating phrases, mimicking the tone, and even guessing what the speaker would say next. After a few weeks, she told me that conversations at work were finally starting to make more sense. She hadn't changed her grammar or vocabulary, she had simply trained her ear. If you think about it, native children don't start with complex conversations either. They begin by hearing slow, clear speech from parents and teachers. They pick up on patterns over time, not all at once. As adults learning a second language, we can use a similar approach. By choosing content that matches where we are now, we make progress smoother and faster. I also recommend rewatching or re-listening to the same slow native content multiple times. Each time you go back, you'll notice something new. Maybe a phrase you didn't catch the first time suddenly becomes clear. Maybe you recognize how two words were connected in a way you didn't expect. The familiarity helps your brain build a stronger foundation. Now, I know that a lot of learners worry that if they only listen to slow content, they'll never get used to fast speech. But that's not how it works. What you're doing is creating mental pathways, getting used to how English works when spoken naturally. Once you have that base, fast speech becomes easier to decode. You'll start hearing those same patterns just faster. And because your brain already knows what to expect, it can catch up more quickly. So if you've been struggling with native English that feels too fast, it might not be your fault. It might just be that you're diving in too deep, too soon. By stepping back and choosing slower native content, you're giving yourself the best chance to succeed. You're letting your brain absorb the patterns, sounds, and flow of real English in a way that's manageable and meaningful. You're building your confidence, one clear sentence at a time. One of the most effective techniques I've discovered for improving listening and speaking skills at the same time is called shadowing. If you haven't heard of it before, shadowing means you listen to someone speaking English and then try to repeat exactly what they say immediately after hearing it, almost as if you're their shadow. It's like following along right behind the speaker, matching their words, rhythm, and intonation as closely as possible. This method works incredibly well because it trains both your ears and your mouth simultaneously, helping you connect what you hear with how you speak, making the whole process more natural and automatic. When I first started using shadowing myself, it felt a little strange. At times, it was challenging to keep up with the speaker, especially if they were speaking quickly or using unfamiliar expressions. But the key is to start simple. Begin with very short sentences, phrases that you already understand well or that come from content designed for learners at your level. The important part is to focus on listening carefully and then trying to reproduce the sounds, stress, and rhythm right away. You don't need to understand every single word perfectly at first. Just try to get the general flow and match the way the speaker sounds. For example, if you're listening to a sentence like, "I'm going to the store," you would listen to it once or twice and then immediately say, "I'm going to the store," trying to copy the exact pronunciation and speed of the speaker. You might notice how the words blend together, how some sounds become softer, or how the intonation rises and falls naturally. This kind of detailed listening is something your brain often misses if you're only passively hearing English. But shadowing forces you to pay attention to every little detail, making it easier for you to recognize those sounds later when you hear them in real conversations. As you become more comfortable with short sentences, you can gradually increase the length and complexity. Try shadowing longer phrases, short dialogues, or even entire paragraphs from podcasts, interviews, or videos. It's important to choose materials that interest you and feel manageable so you stay motivated. One great way to practice is to use transcripts or subtitles while shadowing. Listen to the audio once, read the text, and then listen and speak along. This combination helps you connect the written and spoken forms of English, strengthening your overall language skills. A student I worked with, May from Shanghai, started with very simple shadowing exercises using slow English videos. She practiced every day for about 10 minutes, repeating short sentences right after the speaker. At first, she struggled to keep up and often got the words mixed up. But after a few weeks, she told me she noticed her listening had improved dramatically. She could catch more words in fast conversations, and her pronunciation was clearer because her mouth had become more familiar with English sounds. Shadowing helped her think in English more naturally because she was practicing both hearing and speaking at the same time. Another advantage of shadowing is that it improves your rhythm and intonation, which are often overlooked in traditional learning. Many learners focus on vocabulary and grammar, but forget that English is a musical language with its own beat. When you shadow, you naturally pick up the melody of English, the ups and downs, the pauses, the speed changes, which makes your speech sound more fluent and understandable. It also helps you become less afraid of speaking quickly because your mouth gets used to moving at the pace of native speakers. If you're worried that shadowing might feel awkward, remember that it's a practice tool, not a performance. You don't need to sound perfect right away. The goal is to train your brain and mouth to work together. Over time, as you shadow more, you'll notice that your listening comprehension improves because your brain expects to hear English in the natural way. Your speaking will also get better because your muscles learn how to produce those sounds smoothly and quickly. To start shadowing, pick short clips that last around 30 seconds to 1 minute. Listen to the clip several times without speaking at first, just to understand the meaning. Then, try repeating the sentences right after the speaker. Don't worry if you can't keep up perfectly, just keep trying. Repeat the clip as many times as you need until it feels more natural. Then move on to longer or faster clips. Consistency is the key here. Doing a little bit every day is much better than doing a lot once in a while. Also, don't be afraid to use different types of content for shadowing. You can use podcasts, YouTube videos, TV shows, or even speeches. The important thing is that you enjoy the material and it challenges you just enough to push your skills forward without making you frustrated. You might even discover new favorite speakers or topics along the way, which makes the practice even more fun. Shadowing is a powerful way to connect listening and speaking, and it changes how you experience English. Instead of just hearing words as separate pieces, you start to feel the language as a whole. Your brain learns to anticipate sounds, your mouth learns to produce them quickly, and your confidence grows every time you practice. If you make shadowing a regular part of your English routine, you'll be amazed at how much your understanding of fast speech improves and how much smoother your own speaking becomes. It's not magic, just practice. Practice that trains your brain and your voice to work together naturally. Let me tell you about Kenji from Tokyo. Kenji is a software engineer who had been learning English for a few years. Like many learners, he found that understanding fast English speakers was one of his biggest challenges. What's interesting about Kenji's story is how he discovered one of the most effective ways to improve listening and speaking, almost by accident. Kenji loves cooking, so he often watched cooking videos online, not just in Japanese but also in English, because he wanted to learn new recipes and also practice his English. One day, while watching a video where the chef was explaining step-by-step how to prepare a dish, Kenji decided to try repeating the instructions out loud along with the video. At first, it was just a fun experiment, but then he realized something important. Repeating what he heard helped him focus better, and he started to understand the instructions much more clearly. This simple action, just speaking along with the video, was exactly what we call shadowing. Kenji didn't know the term at the time, but by repeating the chef's words, he was training his brain and mouth to work together, and it made a huge difference. Suddenly, the fast speech didn't feel so overwhelming. Instead, it became something he could follow and even anticipate. He noticed that the more he practiced this way, the easier it became to catch new words and expressions. It wasn't just about cooking anymore. It was about improving his English in a way that felt natural and fun. What I love about Kenji's story is that it shows how shadowing can fit into your daily life, even if you don't have time for formal lessons. You don't need to find special materials or spend hours studying. You can use whatever interests you: music, movies, podcasts, or yes, even cooking videos, and start repeating along with the speakers. This way, you make learning English a part of your hobbies and daily routines, which keeps motivation high. When you enjoy what you're doing, you're more likely to keep practicing regularly, and that consistency is what really brings progress. As Kenji continued his shadowing practice, he began to notice changes beyond just understanding fast speakers. His confidence grew. He started speaking more during meetings at work and felt less nervous when his colleagues spoke quickly. His pronunciation became clearer, and his ability to think quickly in English improved. He told me that shadowing helped him feel more connected to the language, not just as a subject to study, but as something alive and useful in his everyday life. I want you to think about your own interests and consider how you can use shadowing in a way that fits your lifestyle. Maybe you love sports, technology, travel, or art. There are English videos, podcasts, and shows about almost everything. Find something that excites you and start shadowing. Don't worry if you don't catch every word right away, or if it feels difficult in the beginning. Just keep repeating, listening carefully, and slowly your brain will adjust to the sounds and rhythm of natural English speech. Shadowing is a versatile tool. It helps you develop listening skills because you're training your ears to recognize sounds and patterns. At the same time, it improves your speaking because you're practicing the muscle movements needed to produce English words smoothly and quickly. When you repeat the sounds right after hearing them, your brain forms strong connections that make comprehension faster and more automatic. It's like training for a sport. Repetition builds skill and confidence. Kenji's experience is a perfect example of how small changes in your practice can lead to big improvements. He wasn't trying to master English overnight. He just found a way to engage actively with the language every day. That's the key. English isn't just something you listen to passively, it's something you interact with. When you shadow, you're not just hearing words, you're speaking them, feeling their rhythm, and making them part of your own voice. If you want to try shadowing but aren't sure where to start, begin with short clips or segments that you enjoy. Listen a few times, then speak along with the speaker, matching their speed and intonation as best as you can. Don't be afraid to rewind and repeat. The more you do this, the more natural it will feel. Over time, you'll notice that understanding fast English speakers becomes easier because you've trained your brain and mouth to keep up. Remember, learning English is a journey, and every step counts. Just like Kenji, you can discover new ways to practice that make the process enjoyable and effective. Shadowing might be the unexpected tool that helps you unlock new levels of fluency and confidence. Give it a try and see how it transforms your ability to understand and speak English in real life. I want to start by telling you something very important. It is completely normal not to understand everything the first time you hear someone speaking fast English. When you're learning a new language, especially when it comes to listening, your brain needs time to adjust to the sounds, rhythms, and patterns. Sometimes when we listen to native speakers, it feels like everything is happening too fast, like a wave of sounds washing over us. And honestly, that feeling can be frustrating. But here's the key. Not understanding immediately is not a sign that you're failing or that you're not good at English. It's simply part of the process. The most important thing is to be patient with yourself and to use tools and techniques that help you gradually build your skills. One of the most effective strategies I want to share with you today is the power of pausing and replaying. When you listen to fast English speakers, whether it's a podcast, a movie, a YouTube video, or even real conversations, it's okay to stop the audio and rewind. Don't be afraid to do this multiple times. In fact, I encourage you to make it a habit. Pausing and replaying allows your brain to catch details that you might have missed at first. It also gives you the chance to hear the same words and phrases. Again, reinforcing your understanding. This repeated exposure is exactly what your brain needs to create strong connections to the language. I want you to think about learning English like learning to dance or play a musical instrument. When you first try, you don't get all the moves right or all the notes perfect. You watch carefully, you try again, and you keep practicing. Listening is no different. Sometimes you need to go back and hear the same part twice, 3 times, or even more, until it starts to make sense. This repetition helps your ear become familiar with common sounds and how words connect when spoken naturally. To make this easier, I suggest a simple 3-step technique. Listen, repeat, and understand. First, listen carefully to a short segment. Don't rush. Focus on just a few seconds or 1 sentence. Then, pause the audio and repeat out loud what you heard. This step helps you connect what you heard with the way your mouth forms the sounds. Finally, think about what you just repeated. What was the main idea? Which words did you recognize? This step is about comprehension, not perfection. If you don't catch everything, that's okay. The goal is to understand the general meaning and get used to the flow of natural English. By breaking down listening into these small steps, you remove some of the pressure to understand everything at once. You also create moments of active learning where your brain engages fully. It's like breaking a big problem into smaller, manageable pieces. Over time, you'll notice that you need to pause and replay less often because your ear is getting stronger and more confident. One more thing I want to emphasize is the importance of consistency over speed. Many learners worry about how fast they can improve or how quickly they can understand native speakers. But the truth is, speed doesn't matter as much as practicing regularly. Even just 10 or 15 minutes a day of focused listening, combined with pausing and replaying, can lead to steady progress. Don't compare yourself to others or expect instant results. Everyone's journey is unique, and the pace at which you learn depends on many factors, including your exposure to English, your practice habits, and your own brain's way of processing new sounds. Sometimes when you pause and replay, you might feel like you're repeating the same things over and over, but that's exactly how your brain works best. Repetition is a powerful friend in language learning. It helps you move new words and sounds from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. So if you catch yourself rewinding the same sentence multiple times, celebrate that effort. You're training your brain and improving your listening skills. Also, don't be afraid to slow down the audio if you can. Many apps and platforms have speed controls that let you listen at 75% or 80% of the normal speed. This can be very helpful when you're just starting with fast speakers. It gives you a little more time to process each word while still exposing you to real, natural English. As you get more comfortable, you can gradually return to normal speed. Remember that pausing and replaying is not about perfection or testing yourself harshly. It's about giving yourself the chance to hear English in a way that makes sense to you. This technique helps reduce frustration and build confidence. When you feel comfortable using this strategy, you'll enjoy listening more and find it easier to engage with native speakers. So next time you're watching or listening and the words come too fast, don't panic. Take control of your learning by pausing, rewinding, and repeating. Listen again with curiosity and patience. Each time you do this, you are building stronger listening muscles. You're training your brain to recognize the natural speed, the connected words, and the musical flow of English. And with every pause and replay, you're one step closer to understanding fast English speakers with ease. You might notice as you practice this technique that your brain begins to anticipate what comes next. This is a sign that your listening skills are improving. Your mind starts predicting phrases and words before they're fully spoken, which is how native speakers understand each other so quickly. Pausing and replaying trains your brain to develop these instincts. It's an active process, not a passive one. Finally, keep in mind that learning is not a race. Sometimes you might feel stuck, and that's perfectly normal. Pausing and replaying can help you break through those moments and keep moving forward. Celebrate the small victories, understanding one more sentence, catching a new phrase, or following a short conversation. These moments add up and create a foundation for fluency. Remember, it's not about how fast you learn, but how consistently you practice. Be kind to yourself, stay curious, and keep using the power of pause and replay to unlock the world of fast English speakers. Before we finish, I want to take a moment to invite you to reflect on everything we've talked about today. Learning. To understand fast English speakers isn't something that happens overnight. It's a journey that requires patience, practice, and a lot of small steps. So I want you to ask yourself, which of these strategies will you try this week? Will you focus on listening for key words instead of every single word? Maybe you'll practice shadowing by speaking along with videos or audio. Perhaps you'll start pausing and replaying more often to catch those tricky parts. Or maybe you'll use transcripts and subtitles strategically, not as a crutch, but as a tool to support your learning. Whatever you choose, the important thing is to take action and keep moving forward. I always like to remind myself and everyone in this community that learning English is more like running a marathon than a sprint. There's no need to rush or compare yourself to others. Each small effort you make counts and builds on the last one. Every time you listen, every time you practice, you're strengthening your skills and getting closer to your goal. It's normal to feel challenged sometimes, but those challenges are also opportunities for growth. When you keep going, even when it feels hard, you're showing real commitment to your learning. I also want to encourage you to share your experiences. If you try a new strategy and it helps you, or if you find something difficult but keep practicing, please let us know. Leave a comment about what worked for you or what you want to improve next. Sharing your journey not only helps you reflect, but it also motivates others in our community who might be facing the same struggles. Remember, we are all in this together, and your story can inspire someone else. If you know someone who is struggling to understand fast English speakers, why not share this episode with them? Sometimes just knowing that others face the same difficulties and learning some practical tips can make a big difference. We want to create a supportive space where everyone feels understood and encouraged. That's what the English Talk community is all about. A place where you can connect, learn, and grow with others who share your goals. Thank you so much for listening and for being part of this community. Your dedication to improving your English is inspiring. Keep practicing, keep trying new strategies, and keep believing in yourself. I'm excited to hear about your progress and to continue supporting you on this journey. Remember, understanding fast English is absolutely possible. One step, one practice session, one day at a time.